Hi YouTube, this is Evie. Welcome back to my channel. Today I have another video for you all. I just finished filming up my FAQ on my locking anklet, which will probably be up before this video, but the weather decided to completely change, and instead of it being stormy and weird and gray outside, it's now like completely clear and super bright, so I can't film over there anymore. So I had to like redo my like filming setup in this area, so that is why we are here. And today I wanted to talk about going to kink conventions and my experience at Kinkfest. I just got back from Kinkfest 2 days ago, which is a kink convention in Portland that is held over Easter weekend, Friday through Sunday. I had an amazing time. I love going to conventions, and I realized not a lot of people get the opportunity to go to kink conventions, to go to BDSM events, or they don't go because they're not aware of them, or they don't know what to do, they don't know what they're like. So I thought I would make kind of a combination video of like a kink convention survival guide slash my experience at Kinkfest. I love conventions because they are a combination of like every different kind of little like BDSM thing you could want. There's usually a bunch of vendors, there's a bunch of classes, and there's normally a huge dungeon. There's opportunities to socialize and meet people. It's normally held in an area where you can go and, you know, rent a hotel and go to the pool and relax and sort of experience a new city. Like it's traveling and experience kinky things, and it's really like awesome and intense. Like if you are really into like going to video game conventions like PAX, or you really like going to anime conventions or furry conventions or whatever it is, this is sort of our community's version of those kinds of things. It's like a gathering point for everybody in the BDSM community. What we're talking about in this video is going to be specifically related mostly to my experience at Kinkfest. I have been to other kink conventions before, but keep in mind that there are literally like dozens of kink conventions all over the world, not just in the United States. So what I say here and what I explain here may or may not be applicable. What your local kink convention is like, or whatever conventions you've been to before. This is just my own personal experience based on this last convention that I went to. As I mentioned, Kinkfest is a 3-day kink convention that's held over Easter weekend. It opens Friday afternoon and is open until later in the day on Sunday. It is held in a large expo center. It's absolutely massive. It is crazy how big it is. And it's one of the largest kink conventions that happens on the West Coast. So if you're in the area, if you know California, Washington, Idaho, Oregon, somewhere in there, highly recommend checking it out. It does happen every year. Now, one of the reasons why a lot of people don't get to go to kink conventions is that they are pretty expensive. Whereas a dungeon night might run you, 15 to 20 bucks depending on where you live and what event it is. A ticket to go to a kink convention will be anywhere between, $100 and $200. For this particular convention, and a lot of conventions actually run it this way, is they open up tickets like well in advance of the event, anywhere up from, 6 to 8 months in advance, and tickets are cheapest the farther you book them out, and as you get closer and closer to the actual event happening, it gets more expensive. You can get discounts if you have a reciprocal membership sometimes. So if you go to a local dungeon, if you're a member of a local community or mass chapter, a lot of times you will get a discount code if you're a part of those communities to encourage local people to actually show up and go to these conventions. So keep that in mind. You can get some of a discount, but it's normally only 10 to 20 bucks. And also volunteer as well. They may give you a pass for the day and may give you a discounted ticket rate. It'll depend on how much you volunteer and the event itself. But enough about paying for things and volunteering. What are BDSM conventions actually like? What happens at them? What do people look like? Who goes to them? Like all of these unknown things, right? So when you go to a BDSM convention, the very first thing you'll notice when you walk in is a registration booth. You will get a ticket or a stamp or an armband of some variety that is your pass either for the day or for the weekend to go to the event that you're supposed to present when you leave and exit the area. Sometimes, depending on how the actual convention is set up, there will be a big sign right behind the registration desk where you actually enter that says no cell phones, no pictures, no cameras. And if you have a camera on your phone, you're supposed to cover it up with blue tape. You're supposed to keep all cameras away, and it is generally considered, if not outright against the rules, uncouth to have your cell phone out, because usually if it's a private event, as soon as you get behind that curtain behind the registration desk, there's a possibility people are going to be nude. You're going to be seeing some weird things. Not that nude people are weird, but they want to keep privacy as much as possible. A lot of times events will have official photographers that are allowed to take photos with people's consent, but they don't want somebody with a camera phone taking a bunch of pictures during the breastplay class, if you know what I mean. So that is usually how that is set up. You will see nude people. You will see genitalia. If it's something that bothers you, keep that in mind. I actually didn't see a lot of it this year, I think in part because the weather recently has not been that great. So there haven't been as many people, you know, being nude during the convention as there has been in years past just because of the weather. So if you're going in December, you probably won't see a lot of nude people, but if you're going in July in New Orleans, you'll probably see a lot of nude people. Just, you know, keep that in mind. It is a thing that happens and it is normally allowed and encouraged. So many people who go to these events. There are young people, there are old people, there are people of any age in between. There are people who've been in a lifestyle for 2 years or 20 years. There's people of all experience levels. There's people of all backgrounds, be that DOMs, switches, subs. There's people who are into leather. There's pony players. There's latex people. There's people who are really, really enthusiastic about whips. There's people who are completely new and have no idea about anything in BDSM. Like, there are so many different people that go to these events. Some events are more tailored to certain groups than others. Like, for example, there are conventions that are specifically geared towards the leather community. There are ones that are specifically geared for ABDL. There's ones that are specifically geared for rope bondage and shibari, things like that. So some conventions are more specifically tailored, so you won't see as much of a variety, but with a really like wide, just general kink event like Kinkfest or Fetish Con or Thunder in the Mountain, something like that, you are going to see a really, really just unbelievable variety of people that you're just not going to get online in the online community. And that is why I really encourage people, if they can, to go to dungeons and parties and events like this, because it will just, even 3 days of this is just such an eye-opener, and it is like gives you such a new perspective on BDSM and this community, to like see all of these people that are in all these different like dynamics, and they've been in a lifestyle for 50 years or 5 years, and you know, if they're in your peer group or not in your peer group, everybody treats each other equally and they treat each other with respect, and that is just so important and so awesome. I would say after you get past the registration desk, all of that stuff, there are 3 main draws to actually going to a convention like this. There's the vendor area, there's the dungeon, and there's the classes. It basically combines all of the really cool things about kink, all the things that draw people into the community, all in one sort of neat little package. The first thing that is normally open is going to be the vendors area. The vendors area at Kingfest was probably about a dozen or so shops. How big it is going to depend on the convention. For the most part, it is going to be locally made things. So there's going to be a lot of whips, there's going to be a lot of paddles, there's going to be like corsets and kilts and all sorts of different accessories, things that are sort of related in general to the BDSM lifestyle. I'll go over what I actually ended up getting at the convention a little bit later on, but there's going to be a large vendors area. It's a really great way to try out new toys, to just find new things that you maybe wouldn't have ever seen or experienced before, because a lot of times these people, they may have websites, but they don't have Etsy shops, so if you don't already know about them, they can be hard to find. It's also a great way, if you want to see something in person first before you buy it, to not have to pay for shipping, to be able to try something out in person, to actually speak one-on-one or get custom items made. Like, vendors areas are great, especially if you're in the market for something like really, really specific or you want custom work done. Besides that, there are the dungeons and the classes. The dungeons are huge. They are massive. So let's say at your like local normal dungeon, there will be like 2 St. Andrews crosses, there'll be a rack, there will be, you know, 2 hard points, there'll be a spanking bench, there'll be a couple of cages and like large oversized chairs, and maybe there'll be a curtained off area for public sex. At the convention that I went to, Kingfest, it was sort of set up like you walked into this really like long, not exactly narrow, but it was longer than it was wide space that had like red carpet that kind of wound around like this throughout the space, sort of creating 4 like rectangular areas in between the rows of carpet where people could walk around that actually had play areas. And they were just huge. There were dozens of St. Andrew's crosses. There was 3 or 4 cages. There were, over a dozen hard points. There were padogas. There were spanking benches. There was an entire area just for age play. There was an entire area just for whips. There was an entire area just, for pet players. There was just so many different things, and you could walk around. And at any given time, I think there was probably enough furniture for like 70-ish couples to play, probably. I'm really bad at estimating, but there would literally be at any given time over 100 people playing. Now, unlike at your local dungeon that maybe has, time sheets where you reserve a space, people are only supposed to be on them for 30 to 45 minutes, dungeons generally function on an honor system. So at really, really popular spaces, like hardpoints for the most part, you could be waiting, for somebody to finish a scene, and they could take them an hour and a half, it could take them 20 minutes. Like, you just have no idea how long it's going to take somebody to do a scene, and you may be waiting for a space for a really long time. So either you have to go right after the dungeon opens, or you have to just kind of plan your attack around when the dungeon is open, and have somebody else wait for you to reserve a spot once somebody is done with their scene. And it was weird because even though there was literally 60 or 70 people getting spanked or flogged or paddled, all at the same time, there wasn't a lot of blood curdling, ear shattering screaming happening. I think it was just because there was so much noise, so many people getting hit all at once, so much screaming, none of it really sounded louder than anything else. So it was actually a lot easier for me to kind of get in the zone and really enjoy my own scenes, because there was so much ambient noise that none of it stuck out in particular. I could think of maybe 2 times the entire time I was in the dungeon for all 3 days where I heard somebody just absolutely scream at the top of their lungs. But that was very uncommon. Something else I also really liked about it is a lot of dungeons and a lot of conventions in particular won't actually allow blood play or needle play or anything like that at all, but they actually had an entire separate medical area, and it was just so great to see that. And they had everything very well stocked. They had a bunch of supplies all kind of sprinkled throughout the area, because this is a convention, this is a public space. Even if you're fluid bonded with somebody, they do expect you to use condoms. So there was condoms and lube everywhere. There was places to get paper towels and cleaning supplies to clean off your space before and after you used it. That is a really, really important part of just general dungeon hygiene and dungeon etiquette, is before and after you use a space, even if you think somebody has cleaned it before you've used it, just go through with a wet wipe or a disinfectant spray and a towel, whatever it is that they have available for you to clean with, depending on what kind of furniture it is. Just wipe it down real quickly, make sure it's dry before you actually use it and play on it, and then again after you're done, even if you don't think you've gotten any bodily fluids or sweat on it, clean it off again. It is a really important hygiene thing, because literally hundreds of people may be using that same furniture. So just, be safe, be courteous to others, and then clean up after yourself when you're using those things. Now, the other thing, and sort of the big draw for me personally, my sir really, really likes the dungeon element of it. I personally enjoy the classes more than anything else. Just big surprise, guys, I do an educational YouTube channel. I go into kink classes. And the class selection was really, really good at Kingfest. They did everything from introductory aftercare, pain processing, negotiation type of thing, all the way up to hook pull suspensions. There was all spectrum of things you could take at Kingfest. And again, depending on what kind of convention you're going to, that may or may not be the case. If it's a convention that's focused on a specific kind of kink like shibari, you're probably not going to be able to take a breath play class, but if that is something that you are looking for, I would recommend going to just a very general kink convention like this. I pretty much took classes all day on Friday and Saturday. I did skip a few. I didn't take any of the morning classes just because the very earlier ones were not as catered to what I wanted to do. I took some service classes, I took blood play classes, my sir and I took a breath play class together. We took sort of just general kinks that interested us classes. The very, very, very first class I took was a pain processing class, and the walls and the seats were absolutely jammed full of people. Like, they ran out of seats. There were people standing up. There were people like shouting out questions because they couldn't hear anything. Like, it was, I wouldn't say it was a catastrophe, but it was very busy. It was a little bit difficult to hear what was going on just because the presentation was very, very minimal, like PowerPoint slides, with occasionally a slide that had this much text on it, like an entire block of text. But it was mostly the person who was doing the class actually like speaking, and that was the important part. And I learned a lot from that. Like, I get so much information out of these classes, not just from the class itself, but because of the way they're set up, they're usually formatted to be tailored to what people's questions are, if they have any during the course of the class. They're normally about an hour to 2.5 hours long, depending on the nature of the class itself. The hook pull class is obviously going to be a lot longer than the aftercare class, just because of what is actually being covered. Some classes you will have to do like a special pre-registration for if they're going to be really high in demand, or if they require certain equipment like the hook pull suspension. A lot of rigging classes will require that. Something like T-service, where maybe you're actually going to be doing a service or doing sort of a scene as like part of the class, might require something like that, so just keep it in mind if that's something you're really interested in doing. But I love going to classes. I did end up sleeping in a few times and not going to classes very early in the morning, but that did leave me free to actually use the dungeon during the break period between the afternoon class and the evening class, so I would highly recommend it. I also recommend bringing a notepad with you. Sir actually went to Target, bless his heart. He went to Target and he bought me a notepad, but I'm left-handed, so like I can't write in the spiral ring, so that like hurt my hand, getting pen ink everywhere. So he went out again and he got me legal pads, which is what I normally use to write. I use legal pads or loose leaf, and I just took like a bunch of notes. And I need to actually copy some of my other notes down in here from like other classes that I've taken, because I only had this for like half of the convention. But definitely bring a small notepad with you and a pen, because you are not going to be able to remember everything that gets said, and if you have any questions and you want to email the teacher later, you can write those down in here too, send them an email, get clarifications done. If you just want to reference, again, be like, what did they say during that Blood Play 201 class about, that one thing that I was curious about. Like, you never know. Always good to have that down on a notepad if that is an option for you. And it's also a really great way to meet people who are into a similar kink category, or can possibly be a mentor to you. Obviously, I wouldn't necessarily approach somebody during a class, but if you're seeing the same person pop up over and over again in all of your classes, and maybe you see them at a dungeon later that night, it might be good to just strike up a conversation with them, and maybe you'll make a new friend, a new play partner. You never know. Kind of speaking more generally on what my experience was like at Kingfest. We drove down from where we live on Friday night. On Thursday night, actually. We drove down on Thursday night, so we had all day Friday there. We drove down late on Thursday. I didn't think we got in until 11 o'clock or midnight because of traffic and then stopping to get gas and everything. So we were there relatively late on Thursday. We checked in, we slept, and then Friday was actually like the opening day. We had classes, we got registered. We basically instantly met up with a lot of people that we already knew from the area. We ended up meeting them and like running into them a lot throughout the actual like course of the convention, which was great, and I'm really, really happy. It's kind of weird sometimes if you're part of like a nearby community, like how much it's like you see kind of like your own little like microcosm of a community within suddenly this much larger community. I don't know, kind of interesting to me. But we went, registered. The first day we mostly just focused on taking classes. It wasn't until the evening when we actually like went to the dungeon and kind of explored it for the first time. We ended up doing, let's see, that was the night. We ended up doing some rough body play was the first thing that we did, because it was so busy because it's the first night. The only thing that was really open was a bunch of play mats. So we did a bit of rough body play for practice, because we're interested in incorporating that more into our relationship, but it's not something that we're able to do very easily, because if you've seen pictures of us, we're basically like the little short brown black-haired girl, and like Ralph from like Wreck-It Ralph. Like the two people in those movies were basically like that. Like we have a really big size difference, so doing rough body play for us is a challenge. We've been practicing doing that and like not accidentally hurting me. After we did that, I actually ended up doing a suspension with somebody new the first time, which was awesome and very enjoyable. It actually took quite a while to do all of that. I think we were probably there from 8 o'clock until midnight, and after that we were just so tired because we've been up doing classes and getting ready and everything since, you know, basically 12 hours before that. So we've been up for a very long time. That day I took a class on pain processing, which is really interesting and really helpful. We also took a blood play 101 class. I would highly recommend, if you guys are curious in blood play, knife play, needle play, stuff like that, take classes before you engage in it, because there's just so much to know about the process of doing it cleanly and doing it safely that you just can't get over video or like reading descriptions online. Really highly recommend going to classes for that kind of thing. And then on the second day, because we got in so late, we ended up sleeping in. I didn't go to the very first class in the morning. It was a class that I wanted to go to. It was a class specifically about bottoming for rope bondage. But I ended up just not going because it was like, rest my body and do more play later, or get up at 8 o'clock in the morning and then be tired later. So I had to sleep in instead. We ended up getting there before the afternoon class was going to start, so instead we wandered around the vendors area, and that was when I picked up my very first purchase from Kingfest, which was not these. You guys will see those later. Those happened later. Was a kilt. And I'm not going to be able to show it well on camera, but this is from Stumptown Kilts. It is a mini black 13.5 inch, I think, long women's kilt. It has a bunch of like pockets on it. It's pleated. It has a bunch of snaps on it, so it's really easy to take on and take off. This is like, it was expensive. I got the kilt with 3 sets of different sized pockets for I think $151, which is actually a deal because normally the kilts online are like $155 plus, you know, 10 to 15 bucks for the individual pockets, and then also shipping and then tax and everything like that. So this is actually a pretty good deal. That is something to keep in mind for conventions, is a lot of times shop owners will have discounts too. So this is basically what it looks like, all unfolded and everything, and it's super cool and cute, and I love it, and it was really great. I actually ended up wearing it on Sunday, which was the last day, and I could basically fit everything that I needed in just these pockets in this kilt. It was fantastic. After the second day, after we went through the vendors area and everything, Sir ended up getting a few more things, and then we went to our first class of the day, which was the Blood Play 201 class. We'd taken the 101 class the day before, which basically went over stuff that we already knew, but it was a really great class to take, just, you know, as a way to ask kind of more basic questions, like a kind of feel for the instructor if you wanted to take more advanced classes from her. And highly recommend doing that. And I love the 201 class. They went over a bunch of different topics. So they went over blood clotting, they went over drawing blood, and specifically for drinking blood and like how to do that safely. They went over using needles and scalpels for decorative play, and then using them on different areas of the body that are more advanced to do, and kind of just more advanced techniques and things like that. So really valuable class. Super glad that we went. The class that we ended up taking after that, we went to do different ones. He went to an interrogation for BDSM class, and I went to a Victorian high protocol class. And we were both somewhat disappointed in the classes that we ended up taking, because, you know, things aren't always perfect. That's something to keep aware of. You know, when you're going to conventions, things might not always go to plan. My class was pretty good up until the last 30 minutes, when suddenly it devolved into a kids these days have no respect argument class, which just is like nails on a chalkboard to me, because like, why even like bring that up? Like, why even have that be a thing? It's just such an old and like tired argument. I just don't even want to think about it. It was just annoying that it happened. And Sir, he took an interrogation class, like I said, and for him, it felt like it was like a very like oddly specific class. Like, it wasn't just about how to do interrogation and BDSM in general. It was like he was teaching the class how to do a very specific interrogation scene for a very specific person. And that may work and be applicable for some people, but for our relationship, wasn't really something that was going to be applicable, and it wasn't really something unless you had like 2 days and like a very specific room setup and a very specific temperament of submissive or bottom. It really wasn't going to work out. So a little bit disappointing there. We ended up meeting up at the dungeon later that evening. He was doing a self-suspension when I came in because this was at 5 o'clock. So it was basically right after all of the classes were over, but not a lot of people had actually started to like come in and play yet, because normal people would go out and get dinner and then come back. So we did a suspension then. I was in 2 Fudos and a box tie, if anybody was curious. I was in inversion. It was cool. It was fun. I'm normally not suspended from TKs just because of my nerve location, but we're trying to figure out a way to do that safely and figure out how to communicate before anything bad can happen. I think I probably still have some marks on my arm here that you guys totally won't be able to see, but I basically had like a wrap like 3 fingers wide like around my arm here of just like small red dots all around from where the rope was for a couple days afterwards. It was really, really fun. Totally fun and worth it. At some point, and I'm gonna get my brain a little bit confused because doing lots of different bondage and ropey things and needly things makes my brain and my memory a little bit fuzzy, so I'm gonna not remember things probably completely in order from this point forward. But we did a needle play scene. We got a new size of needles to try out, and we kind of just wanted to see how many we could put in before we decided we were done with the scene. So I had a new personal best for a number of needles, so good job, Evie. Evie was proud of herself. He did a little design on my back with them, so that was cool. And then once we actually got done with that, oh no, I remember. We did it later in the evening, and I remember because it was weird because it was the only time I've ever had to wait for a medical play spot to open, and there was actually a scene that was happening that was like, I could not like watch it. Like, I don't want to ick anybody's yum, but like, I didn't like the person who was happening it to, gave me weird vibes. The scene in general gave me weird vibes. Like, it kind of just like made me feel weird in general, and not because they were doing anything wrong or like anything was going wrong with the scene. It was just very much like, I don't want to be a part of whatever it is that you're doing. So I thankfully did not have to like bear witness to for that too long. And I basically just tried to keep my eyes off of it because, you know, don't want to ick anybody's yum. That's their thing. They've consented to it. Not really my place to say anything. So sometimes things like that happen, especially at a convention where you're seeing, you know, 70 different people all doing different scenes at the same time. You're going to see things that aren't for you, and it's your responsibility to just, you know, turn away, and you don't have to look at something you don't want to see, you know? So we did that needle play scene. That was actually the last thing we did that night before we went home. Between when we did that suspension and when we did the needle play scene, we actually left, met up with some friends, and we did a quick photo shoot on the docks behind one of the people's hotel rooms for some bondage. Hopefully I have photos of that soon because I think that came out really well, and I'm so excited to see them. Then after that we went out, we got dinner, and then we came back and we did the needle play scene because you don't want to do needle play on an empty stomach. I had specifically not eaten much that day because I knew we were going to go out for dinner, and I have a stomach that's like this big, so if we ate anything I wouldn't have been able to eat dinner. So that was basically what we did on Saturday. Then we went back to our hotel room, slept like little babies, and we got up on Sunday and could not believe it was the last day. And again, didn't go to the morning class because it wasn't anything happening that was interesting me. There was like a CBT class and like a class on aftercare and a couple of like things that didn't really like pique my interest at all. So we ended up walking around the vendor area again. We went back to the same vendor again, and we bought more needles. I think we went to this one vendor every single day of the convention, and we got needles from them. We got a fire play kit from them. We got a dish towel to use with shibari, like a traditional Japanese dish towel. Sir got a nose hook. We got a bunch of new scalpels. Like, we got just a bunch of stuff there at like the same booth like every single day. I ended up buying a few extra packages of needles for my sir as a gift for actually taking me to the convention, because there's a few sizes that we were missing, and I thought, well, if I get 3 or 4, it's less expensive. It's only like $8 for like a pack of 100, so I'll just get a bunch of different sizes, and that'll be my gift to him. And that's what I ended up getting. I also had been like staring at a bunch of different vendors like the entire time I was there, and I kept like investigating different paddles and like feeling them and kind of just being like very, very like quietly testing out different paddles. I ended up buying 2 paddles from Postmo Woods. These are Paduke, which is an exotic wood. Obviously, it's sort of this red-brown color. This is literally the smallest paddle I've ever seen, and I'm pretty sure this is for CBT or paddling someone's vagina, or rather paddling somebody's vulva if we're going to be biologically correct here. This is really, I thought it was so funny. I just had to get it because it's like, no, bad dog, no, no. Like, it's just, that is what goes through my head when I see this, so had to get it. And then I also got this one as well just because they're matching. This was like $12 and this was like $15, so it was super, super cheap. The owner of the store was really nice. I'll put a link down to its Etsy shop below if you want to check stuff out, but these are really nice paddles. They're really nicely finished. They have a very nice coating on them, and they're actually relatively thin and very light, so these are going to be a good stingy paddle, which is why I got them. So yeah, really, really happy with these paddles. We didn't end up getting anything else that day besides the needles and junk, and then this. I stayed well within my budget for Kingfest, which is really important. If you're going to a convention, make sure you set a budget, because otherwise you will end up overspending. You will be attracted to every single flogger and paddle and corset and shiny thing that you see, and it's going to be really, really hard to not pull out your checkbook every single time to like get every single pretty thing that you see. So set yourself a budget before you go to the vendors area, okay? And then once we were actually done with the vendors area, we went to our last class. Oh, and I forgot to mention, actually, we did go to a breath play class on Saturday. That was the class that we went to earlier today, was the breath play class, which is really, really good. Highly recommend it. I learned so much about breath play. It was actually done by somebody who is an ER surgeon, and like her assistant, who sounded like he also had a medical background, but he was just the assistant, so like his credentials weren't mentioned. But it was so nice because I got to ask, like, people in the class just asked her so many medical questions about everything and like the safety of everything, and it was just so good, so good. So definitely recommend the breastplay class. And then the day after that, we took another class from her and her assistant, which was on rough body play. It was funny because that class was focused around body control and rough body play, where you're the dominant and you're a lot smaller than your submissive. Whereas for us, he's the dominant, like my sir is my dominant, and he's way bigger than I am. But we were still able to apply a lot of that advice to our own relationship and kind of try and figure out ways so that it's not just completely unfair every single time we like start doing a rough body play scene. It takes like 5 seconds before I'm, you know, dead, more or less. So that was really helpful, really nice. Love that class. Before we actually ended up leaving on Sunday, we did 2 more scenes. We went back to the dungeon, and again, because this was the afternoon, it was basically empty. We did a suspension and an animal capture net, which, by the way, awesome. It basically leaves marks all over your body that looks like you went through a waffle iron. It's actually not that painful. It's actually kind of relaxing. It's like a rope bondage hammock is what I'm going to call it. It's like a rope bondage hammock. Really, really fun. He basically just swung me back and forth on that. And then after we did that, we had some recovery time. We did a scalpel scene with one of the new scalpels that we had purchased. Scalpels actually come in like different styles. So normally I think we've been using an 11 or a 10, and this time we used a 15. Which is more or less the same thing as a 10, but a lot smaller and more for detail work. And he cut a paw in my back, and I was like freaking out the entire time, and like I was like, why am I doing this? And why am I doing this? This is so freaky. Why am I doing this? I was freaking out about it and getting like crying, and then when actually like the scene happened, it was a lot easier to process, like, oh, like that's why I'm doing this. That is why I'm doing this. And so we went back and forth with the scene for the while because I didn't think I was going to be able to like handle it very well. I actually ended up doing it, and then he asked me, you know, how you feeling? How you doing? I could do 4 more. Okay, and then you do like 4 more strokes along my back, because once he actually got done like carving the paw print in, he was doing like additional marks down the side of my back. How you feeling now? Okay, I gotta do 4 more, and then we just kept kind of doing that little like incremental baby steps until it's like, okay, I think we're done now, and then cleaned up. And then, you know, once we actually finished doing that scalpel play scene, it was pretty much time to go and head home. So yeah, that was basically what it was like at Kinkfest. If you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, please feel free to leave that down below. I'm always happy to answer questions. Please look in my description box if you want to find my social media, my Patreon, anything else related videos, stuff like that. Until I see you next time, have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.